In a world where insanity reigns supreme and safety pin manufacturers are running out of metal for the diapers of the leftists, it's comforting to know an ancient, fat, long-haired, bearded reprobate has your mind in mind. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, and despite every attempt by the SHR Media Network to revoke his shameless contract, we return to the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon.
You're listening to Late Night Radio on the SHR Media Network. Caution, there will be mature themes explored and potentially adult language used. If conservatarian words, phrases, certain concepts, or rhetoric offends you, tune out now.
Uh-oh, guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody? Julie, hey, guess what day it is? Oh, come on, I know you can hear me. Mike. What day is it, Mike?
Oh, you magnificent bastard, I read your book.
I drink your milkshake.
How dare you?
I call that bold talk for a one-eyed fat man.
Fill your hand, you son of a bitch.
Captain.
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 Captain. Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
No, not yet. Not yet. Don't pass out on me yet. Of course you realize this means war.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
This is the new song. What are they saying? I like it. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to BZ's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, where I'm broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, always spelled with a K. A mere 2 miles east of the locus of evil on the entire left coast, the Bill Mill, the belly of the beast, the Capitol building in downtown Sacramento at 10th and L Streets, and at the end of the show, when I exit the plush, resplendent, sumptuous, and palatial SHR Media studios, I'll be smelling the odoriferous stench of sulfur, brimstone, and evil emanating from downtown Sacramento. And be forewarned, what you're about to hear for the next 2 hours consists of my opinion and no one else's. The Saloon is serving stiff drinks, facts, history, logic, rationality, proportion, context, tradition, intent, and common sense out the front and back doors, depending on the fear porn quotient. Remember, we don't water our drinks just like we don't water our conversation. Politics, religion, crime, culture, economics, race, sex, science, law. We talk about it all right here at the Saloon, where the speech is free, but the booze is not. And again, it's Thursday in the Saloon. It's March. Holy crap. Thursday, March 18th, the year of our Lord, 2021. I don't know what it's doing where you are, but I'm happy as hell tonight. And I gotta tell you why. Because something highly unusual and irregular is happening in California. It's raining. I went out to go get in the Z-Mobile, and it was all covered with wet stuff, and my first thought was, what is that? It's rain. Rain. Glorious, wonderful rain. But tonight, we're going to start off, well, the whole night. I may or may not go into overtime. I'm not quite sure yet. Oh, in chat. In chat. Where the hell have I been? Welcome to Simone, to Mike Pasqua, to Sergeant Booker, to Jack Alexander, to the Alaskan, and one viewer. Tonight, it is, in fact, an SHR Media special report, a coronavirus update, because particularly there's information that you need to know regarding your future medical plans, shall we say. I'll hint at it, something about a vaccine.
This is an SHR Media Network special report.
I guess I could sum up things this way. It's about lies, more lies, and damned lies, where everything but the science is being followed. Instead, of course, it's all about money, 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 money and power, and power and money, power and control, with politics being at the center. Because we've learned, if there's nothing we've learned in the past year, it's that, according to leftist Democrats in the American media maggots, science can go straight to hell. Because throughout all of this, guess what hasn't changed from the CDC? That's right, the COVID survival rate. 0 to 19 years, you have a 99.997% chance of surviving. If you're 20 to 49 years of age, you have a 99.98% chance of surviving. If you're 50 to 69 years of age, you have a 99.5% chance of surviving. And if you're older than 70 and above, you have a 94.6% chance of survival. And isn't it funny, as I've said before doing this, isn't it funny? The CDC absolutely has to be followed until the CDC doesn't need to be granted any veritas because it conflicts with things like leftist politicians and these days teachers' unions. I've done this on 3 previous shows involving coronavirus. I'm going to do it here too. Before we begin with the facts and alternative thoughts and suggestions, which, by the way, are so terribly despised by leftists, I got to play this for you again because, well, it's funny. And remember, humor is only funny because it contains elements of truth. This is Vic DiBitetto. Take it away, Vic.
I had to get out of there. I thought the coronavirus was all around me. Who wasn't wearing a mask? Who weren't wearing gloves? Some lady was standing 5.5 feet away from me. I don't know what to do anymore. Who do I listen to? Do I listen to the experts on TV or the experts on Facebook? What happened to Dr. Fauci? How come he's not in the news conference anymore? What did they do to Dr. Fauci? Oh, my God. Did a spaceship land in a rose garden and take him away to a different planet? Oh, my God. I got to calm down. I got to calm down. Oh, my God. What if the virus is out here?
Take a breath, take a breath.
What do I do with the gloves and the mask? What if the virus is on these? How do I get rid of them? I don't want to throw them on the street. That's not nice. I'll get rid of it later. Oh, my God! I touched the steering wheel. What if the virus is on the steering wheel now? I just spit on the dashboard. What if the virus is on the dashboard on the steering wheel? Oh, my God. I got to calm down. I got to calm down. I'll listen to some music. Oh, my God, I just touched the knob. What if the virus is on the knob? Oh, my God. Calm down, Vic. Calm down. Calm down. Easy. Easy. We'll get through this. Yeah, that's it. We'll get through this. Wait a minute. How do I drive home? Maybe I'll call Lucy and tell her to pick me up. Wait a minute, I can't. What if I take the virus into her car? Oh, my God, my God. I touched my face. What if the virus is on my face? Oh, my God. Wait a minute. I got it. I'll call Uber. Wait a minute. I can't call Uber. That's somebody else's car. What if the virus is in their car? What if the guy driving Uber has the virus? I got it. I'll burn the car. That's it. I'll burn the car and I'll walk home. Yeah, but the virus is out there. I can't leave the car. What do? I have no choice. I gotta drive home. Ah! I touched the seatbelt. Are you fucking kidding me? There's no way out of this. Come on. Fuck it. I won't drive with a seatbelt. I'm gonna fucking die anyway, right?
Right.
Step at a time. You can do this, Vic. We'll get through this. Oh my God! They're into the situation. What am I gonna do?
So what he ends up doing is he ends up going through the car wash with all the windows down. Sergeant Booker in chat said, we know somebody like this. We all know somebody like this. And I bet you do too. And you see them every day. People susceptible to fear porn, I still don't get it to this day. In their cars, windows up, wearing a mask. In case, I guess, the slightest molecule happens to waft its way, I don't know, maybe through the vent. Well, you know, they have to have their vent on recycle, but there are people out there like this. Well, as we all know, social media and the American media maggots in concert with the Democrats and the leftists, they've done their level best to ensure that you, me, the average American citizen, and most importantly, the taxpayer, we are taxpayers, we've been treated like the average mushroom, kept in the dark, fed crap, and expected to produce nevertheless. So tonight I'm going to review and also give you some new information, because a lot of information and stories have been revealed since last we spoke about this. My last communique was January 26th about the coronavirus. And we're going to do this a little bit chronologically because it just makes it easier for me. On January 26th, the CDC made a statement. And this threw the proverbial cat turd in the punch bowl. CDC officials say schools can reopen during pandemic, but precautions are crucial. Schools should reopen as soon as possible if social distancing and mask wearing can be maintained to keep in-person learning safe, health officials with the CDC said in a study published recently in January. The research published online in the journal JAMA provides a framework for how to open schools safely while limiting the spread of COVID-19. Research supports a path forward to maintain or return primarily or fully to in-person instructional delivery, according to the study. So the recommendations provide some clarity about, obviously, this very contentious topic, but they also involved proffering guidelines to local officials, school administrators, and parents. And so this is important for the CTA, the Chicago Teachers, or CTU, Chicago Teachers Union. This was important to them. So while your kids were still at home, probably not learning much of anything, they decided to produce a dance video saying, the moment they're safe, they'll emerge like the chrysalis, like the little butterflies that they are. Safe return or no return, the CTU says, because, like we all know, teachers are more important than emergency responders. They're more important than firefighters, law enforcement, paramedics. Safety. Truck drivers, they're more important than clerks, than mechanics, than railroad workers.
Keep our students and our teachers
safe. More important than roofers, more important than restaurant servers, cooks, maintenance workers, plumbers, electricians, contractors, Uber drivers, couriers, bus drivers, fast food workers, more important than utility workers, street pavers, refuse and sanitation workers, signal maintainers. I could go on and on and on. The answer is no, you're not. You're not more important than that. Hey, in the chat room, welcome again to Simone Mike Pasqua, Jack Alexander, the Alaskan, Sergeant Booker, Eric T., which I believe is Eric Thompson, and Sarah. So, Sarah, good to see all of you folks here tonight. We're also discovering the incredibly corrupt actions and subsequent cover-up involving New York Governor Andrew Cuomo and his nursing home orders, also involving, we just recently discovered, mental health facilities too. Yay! New York AG probe prompts Cuomo team to release nursing home COVID death data. Now, this is from January 28th. In Albany, New York, which is the capital of the state of New York, Attorney General Letitia James accused the Cuomo administration of undercounting COVID nursing home facilities by as much as 50% in a bombshell report on that day, prompting state officials to finally release long-sought-after data on deaths. Following the release of the 76-page report, which also found many elder care facilities failed to protect vulnerable seniors from the deadly virus, State Health Commissioner Howard Zucker provided a breakdown of nursing home deaths. The new data includes residents who died after being taken to a hospital, information that reporters, advocates, and lawmakers have been requesting for months. But the Cuomo administration said, nah, you really don't need to see that. And that hasn't stopped either, because students are not back in school for the most part. Because this is what's been happening. Here's a story, sadly typical of all too many kids. Suburban college student dies by suicide after struggling with isolation. Children's emergency room visits related to mental health have increased significantly during the pandemic, according to CDC. So an 18-year-old University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign freshman died by suicide while grappling with isolation brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic, his family said. Now his mother is sharing his family's tragic story in hopes of sparing others from similar heartbreak. He's just one of thousands, literally thousands. And still, we have people begging to let their kids back in school. And many parents have had enough. I've played this guy before, but he's worth playing again.
You should all be fired from your day jobs, because if your employers knew that you were more inefficient than the DMV, you would be replaced in a heartbeat. I literally just finished a conference call because I'm having to multitask to be here to address you guys. You're a bunch of cowards hiding behind our children as an excuse for keeping schools closed. You think you're some sort of martyrs because of the decisions you're making, when the statistics do not lie that the vast majority of the population is not at risk from this virus. The garbage workers who pick up my freaking trash risk their lives every day more than anyone in this school system. Figure it out or get off the podium. Because you know what? There are people like me and a line of other people out there who will gladly take your seat and figure it out. It's not a high bar. Raise the freaking bar.
I'm going to give staff an opportunity to make sure that the podium and microphone have been...
Please wipe it down ahead of time, please, because we don't want anything.
Oh, they're afraid that because he was upset, they're going to wipe everything down. Because that's really important. I saw Alaskan in chat just say, I heard Rand Paul had it out with the wonderful Dr. Fauci today. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he did. And if I'm not mistaken, if I look here for a little bit, I may be able to find that. Look, here it is. I believe I do have that. I wasn't going to play this initially, but because you guys initially mentioned it, yeah, here's today Dr. Fauci and Rand Paul. What you need to know about Rand Paul is he's also Dr. Rand Paul. Doctor?
That no scientific studies have shown significant numbers of reinfections of patients previously infected or previously vaccinated What specific studies do you cite to argue that the public should be wearing masks well into 2022?
I'm not sure I understand the connection of what you're saying about masks and reinfection. We're talking about people who have never been infected before.
You're telling everybody to wear a mask, whether they've had an infection or a vaccine. What I'm saying is they have immunity, and everybody agrees they have immunity. What studies do you have that people that have had the vaccine or have had the infection are spreading the infection? If we're not spreading the infection, isn't it just theater?
Okay, stop right there. He asked, where are the studies? So this is Rand Paul in the place of you and me and everyone else saying, you say it's about the science. You insist it's about the science. Where's the science? Produce the science.
No, it's
not.
not.
The vaccine and you're wearing 2 masks. Isn't that theater?
No, that's not. Here we go again with the theater. Let's get down to the facts. Here we go again with the theater. Okay, the studies that you quote from Crotty and Sete look at in vitro examination of memory immunity, which in their paper they specifically say this does not necessarily pertain to the actual protection. It's in vitro.
And what studies can you point to that show significant reinfection? There are no studies that show
Just
significant
let me finish the response to your question, if you please. The other thing is that when you talk about reinfection and you don't keep in the concept of variants, that's an entirely different ballgame. That's a good reason for a mask. In the South African study conducted by J&J, they found that people who were infected with wild type and were exposed to the variant in South Africa, the 351, it was as if they had never been infected before. They had no protection. So when you talk about reinfection, you've got to make sure you're talking about wild type. I agree with you that you very likely would have protection from wild type for at least 6 months if you're infected. But we in our country now have variants that are circulating.
Significant reinfection. What study shows significant reinfection, hospitalization, and death after either natural infection or the vaccine? It doesn't exist.
He'll give one. Come on.
There is no evidence that there are significant reinfections after vaccine. In fact, I don't think we have a hospitalization in the United States after the 2-week period after the second vaccination. We don't have a death in the United States.
You're not hearing what I'm saying about variants. We're talking about wild type versus...
And Dr. Fauci, you're not answering the damn question.
Variants.
And what proof is there that there are significant reinfections with hospitalizations and death from the variants? None in our country. Zero.
Well, because we don't have a prevalent of a variant yet. We're having one... Can I finish? We're having 117 that's becoming more dominant.
Policy based on...
Okay, I can't not say this. In the chat room, Sergeant Booker has said Fauci has changed his position more times than a hooker.
Conjecture.
No, it isn't based on conjecture.
Variants, so you want people to wear a mask for another couple years.
No.
You've been vaccinated, and you parade around in 2 masks for show.
No.
You can't get it again. There's virtually 0% chance you're going to...
I've said this most every week. Wouldn't you love to give Dr. Fauci a blood test? I guarantee you, I'll bet you $100 he's got hydroxychloroquine in combo with zinc and a Z-Pack floating around in his bloodstream willy-nilly all over the place right now. And I bet he takes it prophylactically every week, or whatever the dosage is recommended for hydroxychloroquine. No one asks him that. Whiskey Dale, I see you're just in. Welcome.
Get it, and yet you're telling people that have had the vaccine, who have immunity. You're defying everything we know about immunity by telling people to wear a mask who've been vaccinated. No. Instead, you should be saying there is no science to say we're going to have a problem from the large number of people who have been vaccinated. You want to get rid of vaccine hesitancy? Tell them they can quit wearing their mask after they get the vaccine. You want people to get the vaccine? Give them a reward instead of telling them that the nanny state's going to be there for 3 more years and you got to wear a mask forever. People don't want to hear it. There's no science behind it.
Well, let me just state for the record that masks are not theater. Masks are protective.
Okay, that's all Dr. Fauci has. Theater. Give us the stats. Give us the studies. All through this, he had nothing.
We have immunity there, theater. If you already have immunity, you're wearing a mask to give comfort to others. You're not wearing a mask because of any sign.
I totally disagree with you.
Dr. Fauci, if you could respond so that we could understand the difference between the virus itself and the variants and the reason for a mask.
I'm sorry, ma'am, I can't repeat.
If you could respond to the question so that we could all understand the difference between the vaccine in controlling the wild type versus the variants that are out there and the reason for wearing a mask, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, yes. First of all, when you have a variant, you have an immunity that you get with convalescent sera and the same sort of thing. If I vaccinate you or me against the wild type, you get a certain level of antibody that's specific for a particular viral strain. If there's a circulating variant, you don't necessarily have it. You have some spillover.
Okay, stop. In 2005, Dr. Fauci proclaimed that hydroxychloroquine was a wonderful prophylactic for certain strains of viruses. Did you know that Dr. Fauci has investments in remdesivir? Did you know that Dr. Fauci's NIH sent numerous hundreds of thousands of dollars to the Chinese Institute of Virology in Wuhan to essentially weaponize, maybe COVID-19? The Chinese are thick behind this, and I will get to that in the story tonight. Here's something that's very interesting. No one in the American media maggots mentioned that Dr. Simone Gold, and if you don't follow her on Twitter, you should. Dr. Simone Gold pointed out that Facebook just announced it made a mistake. Do you guys remember this? When it censored studies showing hydroxychloroquine saves lives. Censorship is never an air quote, mistake. Tech executives repeatedly, they made a calculated decision month after month, and they silenced physicians worldwide. Here's a story from Gateway Pundit. After 440,000 Americans are dead, Facebook and the American Journal of Medicine admit their stand on hydroxychloroquine was wrong. And some people are calling for prosecution. Back in August of 2020, the Gateway Pundit wrote, the liberal mainstream media can't hide the truth from the American public forever. Sooner or later, it's going to come out. The latest international testing of hydroxychloroquine treatment of coronavirus shows countries that had early use of the drug had a 79% lower mortality rate than countries that banned the use of this safe malaria drug. Then on November 29th, last year, 2020, only a 1 in 17 billion chance that hydroxychloroquine doesn't work, says a medical professor. Hydroxychloroquine really works, says Professor of Medicine Dr. Peter McCullough, describing the treatment as the most widely used therapeutic to treat COVID-19 in the world. The chances that it doesn't work are calculated to be 1 in 17 billion. There's no controversy over whether or not hydroxychloroquine works. The controversy is on the public health approach to COVID-19. Dr. McCullough said the virus invades inside cells, so we have to use drugs that go inside the cell and work to reduce viral replication. The drugs that work within the cell and actually reduce viral replications are hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, doxycycline, and azithromycin. Your common Mark 1 Model 1? Z-Pak, which I've taken before. Sadly, in the United States, and I know in Australia this happens all the time, patients get no treatment whatsoever. They are literally told to stay at home until they're sick enough to go to the hospital. He said, I think that's honestly absolutely atrocious. History is going to go looking back on this and think that it was the absolute worst way to handle a pandemic. And then something came out in the Lancet magazine. a magazine of great repute in the medical world. Well, I wonder what that was. I'll tell you right after this when we come back.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey, are you guys listening? This is Shannon from Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM on SHR Media. I know you've been wondering where we are and what's been going on. Well, folks, that's right. We're back. So please, join us 7 to 9 a.m. Monday through Thursday on SHR Media, on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and Spotify, and Facebook Live at 11 a.m. on Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM at Facebook. You don't want to miss a minute. We've got lots of guests, lots of segments, and lots of interesting things. And let's face it, there's nowhere for you to go, so you might as well tune in. Again, Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM. We're back live on the air on SHR Media, 7 to 9 a.m. Monday through Thursday, audio and Facebook Live, audio and video. Yes, we are going to do video. Facebook Live, Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM. Hope to see you soon.
Unleashed Jeremy Hansen, the most explosive pro-American podcast on the planet. Pro-MAGA, pro-Trump, pro-conservative. Come join the resistance. Fight for what really matters in America. 5 p.m. Central on UJHLive.com, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Pandora, or MAGAbook.com. Come join the resistance and fight for America. Unleashed Jeremy Hansen.
Do you value yourself, your family, your friends? Want to know more about how to survive, thrive, and stay alive in these dynamic times? Listen to Around the Campfire with Kate, Thursday nights and Sunday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Central, only on PSN TV. That's Around the Campfire with Kate. News that nobody in the MSM wants to report. Remember, train hard, train smart to survive, thrive, and stay alive.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, thanks for being here tonight. I am BZ, one each, the rotund one, and you're listening to The Saloon. I have been rated number 18 of the top 75 late-night podcasts on the planet. Number 18. Number 18 with a bullet. So anyway, if you would, do me a favor and share this. I'm on, if you just want to listen to the audio, I'm on shrmedia.com. shrmedia.com. If you want to go to the SHR Media YouTube channel, you can watch the show there, streaming live. And if you want to go to the SHR Media Facebook page, I am streaming there as well. As long as they'll let me stream, I shall do so. Now in chat, it's interesting. Jack Alexander in the SHR Media chat, great people there. I would highly recommend you go over. Said that he got a suspension from YouTube for quoting from The Lancet. Well, I'm not going to quote from The Lancet, but I will say this. I found an article where The Lancet completely retracted an article delineating what it believed were the disadvantages of hydroxychloroquine. Imagine that. I looked through this article and I went, deleted, deleted, deleted. It had the whole article, deleted, deleted, paragraph after paragraph after paragraph, deleted, deleted. At least it had the guts to do so. Governor Cuomo, as everybody else knows, he's having a bit of a problem these days with sexual harassment, and the media, of course, are focusing on the sexual harassment aspect of what he's been doing. And for whatever reason, I just don't get it. Well, I do, really. In my opinion, Governor Cuomo of New York is, well, we know he's smug, dismissive, and sanctimonious. He dismissed nursing home death criticism and tells critics, go talk to the federal government. He is already taking heat for implementing policies that fostered the spread of the new coronavirus in nursing homes, where some of the most vulnerable people lived. Those attacks reignited in the wake of a report from New York State Attorney General Letitia James that found officials undercounted the number of deaths among seniors by as much as 50%. And Cuomo's response? Go talk to the federal government. I'll repeat this again for those of you who just may have tuned in. New York AG Letitia James found that officials undercounted the number of deaths in the state of New York among seniors by as much as 50%. You and I both know it's more. January, by the way, is also because I watched this, is also the time when Juan Williams said, literally, hydroxychloroquine, that's no hope. What he says, though, is typical of leftists. I am convinced the only reason that people are not interested in hydroxychloroquine or the obvious is because Trump touted it. And Lord knows we can't follow anything that he says. Leftists like Cuomo would rather see people die than admit Trump was correct about that drug. Studies are proving him correct again. Here's what I believe. After it's going to take a number of years, and even then I don't know if it's going to come out, we will later determine, I predict, that we could have saved thousands and thousands of lives had hydroxychloroquine been utilized prophylactically. Then, of course, we knew that vaccines began to emerge, and simultaneously stories about said vaccines came to light. Now, this one from the UK first is January 29th. UK nursing home, 24 residents, 1/3 of them died in 3 weeks after an experimental mRNA COVID injection. In what is becoming almost a daily report of massive nursing home deaths following infections of experimental mRNA COVID shots, a nursing home in the UK is reporting over 1/3 of their residents died after receiving the mRNA experimental COVID injections. Okay, remember that word, please, experimental. Hold that in your tickler file in your brain. I'll be coming back to that. You weren't supposed to hear or read about any of that stuff, though. And then here's something weird. Something weird occurred 3 days prior to that. Merck scraps COVID vaccines. Says it's more effective to get the virus and recover. And I bet you didn't hear about that. Vaccine manufacturer Merck has abandoned development of 2 coronavirus vaccines, saying that after extensive research, it was concluded that the shots offered less protection than just contracting the virus itself and developing antibodies. The company announced that the shots V590 and V591 were well tolerated by test patients. However, they generated an inferior immune system response in comparison with natural infection. The company stated it's going to focus instead on research into therapeutic drugs labeled as MK7110 and MK4482. We also discovered this. Listen up, people. This is related. We also discovered this regarding China, which should come as absolutely zip zero, the null set, no surprise to thinking and cognizant American citizens. China is collecting the world's DNA, and the reason is very, very sinister. This comes from Gordon Chang. If you ever have the chance to listen to Gordon Chang or buy his book, I would highly suggest it. He says, the PRC, the People's Republic of China, has been collecting people's DNA for years. And his book, by the way, which I have, is called The Coming Collapse of China. The country's, China's motivation should be of immense concern to the U.S. With over 80 million health profiles, China now has the largest DNA database in the world and growing. Gordon Chang, in an interview, warned that China plans to China plans to use this information to create bioweapons designed to target specific ethnic groups. The coronavirus is not the last pathogen that will be generated from Chinese soil. And we've got to be concerned that the next disease is more transmissible and more deadly than the novel coronavirus, Gordon Chang said. China reportedly collects the DNA of its own citizens for purposes of law enforcement, tracking down dissidents and forming a tightly controlled surveillance state. They've also found ways to obtain the DNA of foreigners, including Americans. How exactly did they get this information? By buying American companies which have DNA profiles, subsidizing DNA analysis for ancestry companies, and hacking. Some people have told me to my face, oh, it's no big deal. I sent in my DNA for Ancestry.com. Let's just say that, just for example. You folks do know that they sell that, right? You do know that they sell that information. You probably just didn't think that they're selling it to China, but if it's for sale and the money's right, China's going to buy it. And they're going to create another bioweapon. So, let me be blunt. This is what they're aiming for. Because if I can think about it, anybody else can. They're going to be targeting certain ethnicities while simultaneously making sure that in the creation of this bioweapon, they're going to be excluding the Chinese themselves. Very specifically targeted bioweapons, far, far, far beyond the enhancing done currently in the Wuhan Center for Virology. Regarding school closures, by the way, and this is part and parcel of the whole shindig, the Children's Health Defense California chapter wrote a letter to California superintendents which read, because they want to make sure that the schools cut open, but leftists don't want to do this. As the world learns to navigate COVID-19, opening schools safely is in everyone's best interest. We've learned the California public school districts such as LAUSD and the California Department of Education intend to mandate frequent reverse transphase polymerase chain reaction RT-PCR testing on students, and when investigational COVID-19 vaccines are available to children, intend to mandate students and employees be vaccinated before they can return to campus. We're monitoring CDE efforts to set up testing and vaccination centers on campus. Okay, so basically, they don't want kids back. Protracted school closures, though, have created an educational and mental health emergency among students due to learning loss from remote learning and isolation from their peers, sports, cultural activities, jobs, and other support systems. Teen suicides are at an all-time high. One of those massive, many tragic losses. Teenager Dylan Buckner had depression worsen significantly after COVID hit, and that led to his suicide. The family believes that had COVID not occurred, or the country's response to COVID had been more effective, Dylan would still be alive today. So let me point out the obvious, because that's part of my job. Jack is taken off. See you, Jack. I hope you feel better. Just remember this. Doctors practice medicine. It's called a practice for a reason. And that's why you go, sometimes you may decide you're going to go from one doctor to another to get the proverbial second opinion. But according to leftists, though, you should never acquire another opinion that somehow manages to counter theirs. Well, here's another doctor's opinion, which that's why I'm here, to offer alternatives.
We know what works. These don't work against viruses.
He's talking about masks.
That's simply what it is. It's been shown many times. It's nothing to do with COVID. COVID doesn't even factor into the equation because for years we've been looking at these issues. So they have these spacesuits. They're called PAPRs. They're incredibly effective. They filter viruses down to, I think, the 0.01 or something like that. Basically, we have materials like N99, N100, but N95 blocks, let's say 5%, only 5% of airborne particles can get through. But all viruses can get through, period. All viruses can get through. Now, do they get through? No, it's just like a chain link fence. If you throw sand in a chain link fence, not all the sand gets through. So I think the best example I can say is like the reason we wear masks and the reason I wear a mask, because the fear is so massive in this country. I wear a mask so people don't think I don't care about it. Okay? But I don't wear a mask because they work. We know what works. These don't work against viruses. Regular masks don't work. That's simply what it is. It's been shown many times. It's nothing to do with...
It's fear porn. It's acquiescing to fear porn. I created that little phrase, and I use it frequently. I banty it about. We also know this as well because I have a history of speaking and writing plainly regarding my thoughts and opinions. President Trump, I'm telling you, would have acquired a second term if not for Wuhan 19. The Democrats and the leftists, they realize it. The American media maggots realize it. And China, Russia, North Korea, and the bulk of Europe know it as well. So they did an autopsy on the President Trump re-election, and they discovered that his presidential campaign demonstrates voters' perception of his coronavirus response affected his support in key swing states. He won in 2016, but lost in 2020. The report, which Trump's chief campaign pollster Tony Fabrizio drafted, shows the coronavirus was the most important issue of the 2020 election. Moving along, we discovered more about Governor Cuomo's nursing home tragedy and the cover-up that came along with it. New York Senate Democrats block subpoena for COVID-19 nursing home death data. Democrats who controlled the state Senate blocked a motion to subpoena records of the Cuomo administration seeking a fuller accounting of nursing home residents who died from the coronavirus. First you have the issue, then you have the cover-up. Then something big dropped from the CDC that clearly the leftist Democrats and American media maggots hadn't anticipated. And oh, did this create a kerfuffle. CDC director says schools can't safely open without vaccinating teachers. Teachers don't need to get vaccinated against COVID-19 before schools can safely reopen. The head of the CDC said in a statement, there is increasing data to suggest that schools can safely reopen and that safe reopening does not suggest that teachers need to be vaccinated. CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky told reporters during a White House news briefing on COVID-19. Vaccinations of teachers is not a prerequisite for safely reopening schools, she said. This is interesting. During a press briefing, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki walked back Walensky's comments, saying they were not official guidance from the CDC. Except that, well, the comments came from the director of the CDC herself. But I guess in their eyes, that's not really official. The director of the CDC. Bloomberg even wrote a headline that's saying, when will life return to normal? In 7 years at today's vaccine rates. So you have to remember, okay, when? When will we get back to normal? I subscribe to the Epoch Times, EPOCH. Some people call it Epoch. I call it the Epoch Times. I get the newspaper version, and I also get the digital version. So I'm an analog and a digital guy with regard to the Epoch Times. They wrote an editorial which nails it, giving the right name to the virus causing a worldwide pandemic. There has been controversy recently about what to call the virus that has been unleashed worldwide. The Chinese Communist Party, CCP, prefers novel coronavirus. Others have referred to it as the Wuhan virus after its place of origin, which is common in naming diseases. The Epoch Times suggests a more accurate name is CCP virus. The name holds the CCP accountable for its wanton disregard of human life, and consequent spawning of a pandemic that has put untold numbers of people in countries around the world at risk while creating widespread fear and devastating the economies of nations trying to cope with this disaster and this disease. After all, CCP officials knew in early December, I submit it was earlier than that the virus had appeared in Wuhan, but they sat on the information for 6 weeks. They arrested those who tried to warn of the danger, accusing them of spreading rumors. Chinese accusing people of spreading rumors. That doesn't sound like Facebook or YouTube or Google or Twitter or Instagram or any of that crap. Does it? And they employed the regime's rigorous censorship, Google, Twitter, Facebook, to prevent media coverage and delete any mentions of it from social media. What might have been obtained was allowed silently, or what could have been contained was allowed to spread. Showing up in all of China, individuals who might have protected themselves became victims in numbers far greater than China has admitted. By late January, there were reports that all of the crematoria in Wuhan were operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to deal with the crush of dead bodies. And still, China, I don't think China has had to pay any sort of significant price for dropping this little bomb, not just on their own nation, but the rest of the planet. Why? Because the rest of the planet, with a few exceptions, fears China. President Trump didn't. President Biden and his sycophants do. Meanwhile, the measures taken to quarantine and treat the population of Wuhan were grotesquely inhumane. Do you remember seeing this in the media? Occasionally it would get through. Apartment buildings were welded shut. Temporary hospitals were created that actually served as jails for those believed to be sick. Locked into these places with no medical treatment and little food, many of these unfortunates were trapped there until death. So in lying about the danger facing China, the CCP was acting according to its usual script. The CCP's dominant narrative is that the party is great and glorious and correct. The presence of the deadly CCP virus in Wuhan or in 2003 of the SARS virus doesn't fit the script. As with SARS, the first response was denial. This didn't happen. Let's also not forget, folks, China stated it could easily hold the U.S. and the world hostage should it decide to withhold medicines, which they threatened, withhold antibiotics, various other medicines, and PPE, should we get out of line, you see. So the name CCP virus also sounds a warning. Those nations and individuals close to the CCP, they're the ones suffering the worst effects from this virus, as seen in the raging infections in the CCP's close ally, Iran and Italy. That was occurring early. The only G7 nations to sign into the Belt and Road Initiative. You know, sucking up to China. Taiwan, Hong Kong, which rejected the CCP. Taiwan, in a recent landslide national election in Hong Kong and months of massive demonstrations, have had relatively few infections. But remember, the WHO doesn't dance to the tune of China. Oh, the WHO under Tedros also removed Taiwan from any WHO response. Well, that didn't have anything to do with anything. And because leftists and Americans have such short memories, we have historically named viruses and diseases after people and places. I just happen to have a ton of them. Here are 17 other diseases named after populations or places. This was from a guy named Tristan Justice at the Federalist. West Nile virus, named after the West Nile district of Uganda, discovered in 1937. What about the guinea worm, named by European explorers to the Guinea coast of West Africa in the 1600s? Rocky Mountain spotted fever, named after the mountain range spreading across western North America, first recognized in 1896 in Idaho. What about Lyme disease? Named after a large outbreak of the disease occurred in Lyme and Old Lyme, Connecticut in the 1970s. Ross River fever, named after a mosquito found to be the cause of the Ross River of Queensland, Australia by the 1960s. The first major outbreak of Ross River fever, occurred in 1928. Omsk. There was a line in Dr. Strangelove. Do you know the area code for Omsk? Omsk hemorrhagic fever, named after its 1940s discovery in Omsk, Russia. Ebola hemorrhagic fever, named in 1976 for the Ebola River in Zaire, located in Central Africa. What about MERS? Did you ever recognize or realize what MERS stands for? MERS stands for the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, also known as camel flu, reported in Saudi Arabia in 2012, and all cases are linked to those who traveled to the Middle Eastern Peninsula. Valley fever earned its nickname from a 1930s outbreak in San Joaquin, the San Joaquin Valley of California. The first case came from Argentina. Marburg disease, almost as virulent as Ebola, named after Marburg, Germany in 1967. Novovirus, named after Norwalk, Ohio, after an outbreak in 1968. Zika fever, first discovered in 1947 and named after the Zika forest in Uganda. Japanese encephalitis, named after the first case in Japan in 1871. German measles, named after the German doctors who first described it in the 18th century. It's also, by the way, sometimes referred to as rubella. Spanish flu. The true origins of the Spanish flu are pretty much unknown, but the disease earned its name after Spain began to report deaths from the flu in its newspapers. Lassa fever. That came from Lassa, Nigeria in 1969, and Legionnaire's disease, named in 76, following an outbreak of people contracting the lung infection after attending an American Legion convention in Philadelphia. So, just like we can't have Gina Carano, we can't have Dr. Zeus, we can't have Pepe Le Pew, we can't have Speedy Gonzales and spider monkeys, and we can't have diseases named after their points of origin. Remember, California, always spelled it with a K, Governor Gavin Newsom? Remember he locked the state down with glee, simultaneously dining at the French Laundry in Napa, one of the most expensive restaurants in the entire damn state, and there's a lot of them. And he had a liquor bill of $12,000. He received one measly rebuke. In February, U.S. Supreme Court rules against Newsom on indoor church services in California always spell it with a K, please, COVID-19 case. In a ruling that could hamper Newsom's efforts to enforce COVID-19 stay-at-home orders, the U.S. Supreme Court knocked down the state's prohibition on indoor church services. Yay, SCOTUS. Then a little pushback started. Pushback? Yeah, pushback on vaccines.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
It is he that is me, bringing perspective from across the sea. Join me, Jack Alexander, 4 days a week for the Jack Alexander Experiment podcast, as I take a unique outsider's look at the news and issues affecting life and liberty here in the USA. I'll show you what the mainstream media refuses to. Politics, border security, defense, healthcare, travel, nothing is off limits. Catch the Jack Alexander Experiment podcast each Monday to Thursday on Facebook, YouTube, and everywhere good podcasts can be found. Also, check out the website, www.jackalexanderexperiment.com.
It's your business diva here, Melanie Collette.
I am inviting you to a front row seat as I discuss some of the most intriguing details of wealth and finance with today's movers and shakers in the world of business. Listen in and discover financial truths on a global, domestic, and household scale. Uncover topics that will impact your wallet today and in the future. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, right here on SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. You can't afford to miss it.
After 6 years covering terror and corruption, the Unpleasant Blind Guy is making a change. I'm Dave Milner. Join me on Spreaker and YouTube through SHR Media and on the Western Free Radio Network as I team up with Jeff Mitchell, host of the English Defense League radio show on blogtalkradio.com. Check show pages for air times. It's the Unpleasant Blind Guy.
On EDL Radio.
There's
no surrender, ever.
Because truth is not always pleasant.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And we're back 1 hour down, another hour to go. I'm BZ, I'm the bloviating Zeppelin right here in the Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, where I am proud to state and announce that I stand at number 18 in the top 75 late-night talk show podcasts you must follow in 2021. Seth Meyers' podcast came out number 1. Oh, I couldn't beat Seth. How sad, how sad. If you're listening to the show on Spreaker, please share it on Spreaker. If you're watching on the SHR Media Facebook page, please share on Facebook. And or if you happen to be watching the SHR Media YouTube channel, please share on there. Hit the little subscribe thingy there. I think it looks like a bell, kind of like that. And share alike. Thanks to everyone for being here. Before the break, I said, there was a little pushback coming with regard to the vaccine. And here's a story from February. Yeah, good luck, BZ, with that. February 5th. February, dummy. February 5th of this year. Nearly half of Santa Clara County deputy sheriffs and staff decline the vaccine. As Santa Clara County works to boost its COVID-19 vaccinations by expanding sites to get a shot, information released during a public safety meeting this week shows that of the sheriff's deputies and staff, 48% declined the vaccine when asked. Supervisor Susan Ellenberg, who was shocked at this, said, "This is a mind-boggling number. I'm a little bit speechless," she said. We can't significantly reduce or eliminate outbreaks in the jail if every day we have people coming into the jail who haven't been vaccinated. I wonder why that was. Well, keep listening. I'm getting there. Axios, which is kind of like a stopped clock sometimes, but I do refer to articles occasionally from Axios, examine the literal costs of lockdowns on schools. The pandemic's disruption of in-person school is causing headaches for students, parents, and teachers, but it's also going to trigger long-term economic consequences to the tune, they determined, of trillions of dollars. The big picture is the U.S. economy could take a $14 trillion to $28 trillion blow in the long run due to coronavirus-induced learning loss, according to economists' predictions. You ever try to learn, air quotes, learn over TikTok or Zoom or any of that crap? Good luck. My wife has to use it. And everybody hates it. The longer the pandemic keeps kids out of classrooms, the higher the number is going to climb. Kids in California are not all yet back in classrooms, of course. I should tell you, California always spelled with a K. Nobody's paying attention to this absolutely stunningly large economic cost that just keeps piling up, said Eric Hanushek, a Stanford economist and one of the architects of an OECD analysis of the economic impact of COVID-19 on learning loss. On average, American students from kindergarten to 5th grade have missed out on 20% of the reading, 33% of the math skills they would have learned in normal times, according to a McKinsey report that analyzed diagnostic test scores across the country. And the learning loss isn't equal. One of the authors of McKinsey's report says, when looking just at students of color, those numbers go up to 23% and 41% for reading and math. That's because students of color are more likely to be in resource-strapped school districts with poor remote learning infrastructure. They're also far more likely to lack steady access to devices or the internet. BZs aside, I suspect that is massive bullshit. DC, for example, spends more per student than just about any other school district in the entire nation, and scores are crap. Why? Because a lot of that money gets funneled off to the side. This is corruption. The number of high school dropouts is also projected to spike as a result of the pandemic. Plus, they're not even counting the mental, the physical, the sociological effects on children. So where did this virus come from in terms of motivation or need? From what is known as a gain-of-function research. So, U.S. officials revisit rules for disclosing risky disease experiments. A panel is considering how much to reveal about a largely secret review process of gain-of-function research. What is that? U.S. researchers are pushing the government to be more transparent about federally funded research. Oh, yeah, the federal dollars from you and me that went to Wuhan that involves making pathogens. Okay, gain of function? You want a gain of function for a coronavirus? Do you want a gain of function of Ebola or Marburg? What that means is you're raising its efficacy. You're raising its transmissibility. That's making it more deadly, more transferable. Several disease researchers who attended a recent meeting to discuss transparency around such studies say the U.S. government should offer a public explanation when it approves such gain-of-function experiments. Okay, stop. I'm just going to say this right now. Gain-of-function virology research needs to be made illegal. Period. Gain-of-function is federally funded research that involves making pathogens more deadly or more transmissible. It should be illegal worldwide, unless you and me, we're all just enjoying the hell out of Wuhan 19. But you trust your government, don't you? Speaking of great labs, let's examine, maybe a not-so-great lab. This comes from California, always spelled with a K. Whistleblower allegations from inside California's, always spelled with a K, billion-dollar COVID lab. This is from February the 8th of this year. Lab techs sleeping while processing COVID samples for testing. Whistleblowers found him, and they were doing it, sleeping while they should have been monitoring tests. COVID test swabs found in restrooms. Those are just two of the concerning allegations from whistleblowers about what's happening inside the state of California's, always spelled with a K, new billion-dollar COVID testing lab. So CBS 13 in Sacramento uncovered thousands of inconclusive test results coming out of the state's new lab late last year. Now whistleblowers want the public to know what's really going on inside. I'm sure you heard about this, didn't you? No? I can't imagine why not. CBS interviewed more than half a dozen whistleblowers and obtained dozens of internal records and quality control reports. The documents detail problems ranging from contamination causing inconclusive results to swapped samples and inaccurate results sent to patients. Like you. Records indicate the employees handling patient specimens had not been signed off for competency on crucial skills. Documented competency is required, oddly enough, under federal law. Then we saw this in January. CDC expands negative COVID-19 test requirement to all air passengers entering the United States. So if you're coming to the U.S. on a plane, before you get on, you got to have a negative test. This, of course, doesn't really hold when you walk illegally into the nation, however. That's a story for another day. But if you have the guts, the gall, the temerity to insist on your kids going back to school, you could maybe use this article in its studies as evidence of, quote, the science. It won't be considered, though, because this just came out. 3 studies highlight low COVID risk of in-person school. A trio of new studies demonstrate low risk of COVID-19 infection and spread in schools, including limited in-school COVID-19 transmission in North Carolina, few cases of the coronavirus-associated multisystem inflammatory syndrome in children, MIS-C, in Swedish schools, and minimal spread of the virus from primary school students in Norway. If you go to bloviatingzeppelin.net, you will find the link there for the studies. Consideration is being considered for requirements here before you board a plane on national flights. So we're considering, the government is considering COVID-19 testing requirements for domestic air travel. There's an entire active conversation with the CDC right now. Pete Buttigieg, Transportation Secretary on the cabinet of Biden. Buttigieg told Axios, "What I can tell you is it's going to be guided by data, by science, just like leftists love science, by medicine, and by the input of people who are actually going to have to carry this out." It was no shock whatsoever. This came from the WHO, the World Health Organization, owned and operated as a subsidiary of the Chinese Communist company, managed by Dr. Tedros, nothing more than a bought and paid for Chinese puppet. Do you remember this? First this came out. WHO says extremely unlikely the virus leaked from a lab in China. This was on February 9th of this year. Peter Ben Emberek, the head of the World Health Organization mission, said it was, quote, this is a quote from him, extremely unlikely that the virus spread from a lab in the city of Wuhan. He said more work was needed to identify the source of the virus. The investigation could now focus on Southeast Asia, one expert said. The WHO team are currently at the end of their investigation mission. Wuhan in Chinese central Hubei province is the first place in the world the virus was detected in 2019. Since then, more than 106 million cases and 2.3 million deaths have been reported worldwide. Now, WHO Dr. Emberek told a press conference the investigation had uncovered new information, but had not dramatically changed the picture of the outbreak. Experts believe the virus is likely to have originated in animals before spreading to humans, but they're not sure how. Now, see, that's really weird, I think, because do you remember when recently, I think about 2 weeks ago, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said that U.S. intelligence indicated, Wuhan 19 did in fact come from a lab in Wuhan, hence the name. From China. Mike, are you going to play for me? Mike? Looks like Mike may not play for me. Oh, wait. Tell you what. Let's turn up the volume here a little bit. And they're playing an ad, and I don't want to give them an ad. I don't do ads here. Anyway. Here we go.
Mike Pompeo, our guest now on this and many more topics. And, sir, thank you for your time, and good morning to you.
Morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Bill. Good morning, Dana.
I want to get your reaction on this, and I want to take you back to May of last year, ABC interview. The question was asked of you, and the following answer went like this. Just watch.
I can tell you that there is a significant amount of evidence that this came from that laboratory in Wuhan.
Do you think they intentionally released that virus, or it was an accident in the lab?
Okay, this was ABC.
I don't have anything to say about that. I think there's a lot to know. But I can say this. We've done our best to try and answer all of those questions.
How do we look at that now, sir? Your reaction on the story and the headline from the World Health Organization.
Listen up.
Well, Bill, I've seen that headline. And I must say the reason we left the World Health Organization was because we came to believe that it was corrupt. It had been politicized. It was bending a knee to General Secretary Xi Jinping.
Oh, Biden brought us back, though. Don't forget.
In China. I hope that's not the case here with what they've announced today. I'll look forward to seeing their reports and analysis. But I don't believe it's the case that they got access that they needed. I know they didn't get it. I hope that they got to see all the data, all the science, into the lab, talk to the doctors, interview them in private, in places where they could actually tell the truth about what took place, not under the supervision of a Communist Party person sitting in the back of the room making sure that they towed the Communist Party line. So look forward to seeing their results. Right. I continue to know that there was significant evidence, Bill, that this may well have come from that laboratory.
So nothing has changed in your view that it came from the lab?
Not a thing.
I have an alien TR-3B to sell you if you believe that China let these guys see, I don't know, 2 actual pages of what occurred. Then this occurred. This blew up. The New York Post broke the news about Governor Andrew Cuomo and his now outed cover-up. Cuomo aide Melissa DeRosa admits they hid nursing home data so feds wouldn't find it. This was on February 11th. This year, Governor Andrew Cuomo's top aide privately apologized to Democrat lawmakers for withholding the state's nursing home death toll from COVID-19, telling them, "We froze out of fear that the true numbers would be, quote, used against us by federal prosecutors," the Post learned. The stunning admission of a cover-up was made by Secretary to the Governor, Melissa DeRosa, during a video conference call with state Democrat leaders, in which she said the Cuomo administration had rebuffed a legislative request for the tally in August because, quote, right around that same time, then President Donald Trump turns this into a giant political football, according to an audio recording of the 2-hour meeting. He starts tweeting that we killed everybody in nursing homes, DeRosa said. He was right. He starts going after New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy, who did the same thing. He starts going after Governor Newsom in California. Always spell it with a K. He starts going after Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. The guts of that Trump. In addition to attacking Cuomo's fellow Democrat governors, DeRosa said Trump directs the Department of Justice to do an investigation into us. And basically, we froze, she told the lawmakers on the call. So usually the cover-up is worse than the scandal. In this case, we're talking about 15,000 deaths in the state of New York due to Governor Cuomo's order to send hot Wuhan 19 patients into nursing homes, and we found out mental care facilities. There are 5-year-olds in this nation who could have predicted exactly what would have happened. Then she wrote and said, because then we were in a position where we weren't sure if what we were going to give the Department of Justice or what we give to you guys, what we start saying was going to be used against us, while we weren't sure if there's going to be an investigation. So we knew we're corrupt, and we don't want to tell you that. DeRosa said that played a very large role into this. So what we intuited logically all along was confirmed. Cuomo lied all along. To me, and this is my considered opinion, this is called consciousness of guilt. And again, my opinion, in my mind, lends credence to a criminal prosecution for murder. You can't tell me a good attorney couldn't prove with this fact pattern and others that there was no malice aforethought. And yet, this is what you have for a response from Cuomo.
Whether a person died in a hospital or died in a nursing home, it's the people died. We're below the national average in number of deaths in nursing homes. But who cares? They died.
Can you feature a more dismissive, sanctimonious prick, murdering prick than Governor Cuomo? Just ask him. He had nothing to do with 15,000 deaths in nursing home facilities. Okay, just because he sent the order, doubled down on the order, covered it up, took money from nursing companies, cooked the numbers and cooked the books, well, that doesn't really mean anything. Then the AP published this the same day. Over 9,000 virus patients were sent into New York nursing homes. 9,000 hot Wuhan 19 patients were sent into New York nursing homes containing the least able individuals on the planet to fight a virus, into facilities that historically, because I've been in a bunch of them myself personally, involving family members, that generally have the least trained staff, least paid staff, least equipped staff, and went and did it anyway. More than 9,000 recovering coronavirus patients in New York State were released from hospitals into nursing homes early in the pandemic under a controversial, and that's how you write this, a controversial directive that was scrapped amid criticism at accelerated outbreaks. The new number of 9,056 recovering patients sent to hundreds of nursing homes is more than 40% higher than what the state health department in New York previously released. And it raises new questions as to whether a March 25th of 2020 directive from Governor Andrew Cuomo helped spread sickness and death among residents, a charge the state disputes. The Cuomo administration's March 25th directive barred nursing homes from refusing people just because they had COVID-19. It was intended, they said, to free up space in hospitals swamped in the early days of the pandemic. Hello, ship. You had a ship. Hello, facilities. I watched people build them. In the Javits Center, I watched these things being built. But you still did it anyway. It came under criticism from advocates for nursing home residents and their relatives, who said it had the potential to spread the virus in a state that at the time already had the nation's highest nursing home death toll. Imagine that. Now, I mentioned hydroxychloroquine. Did I not? Of course I did. Did any of you happen to see the video from a doctor, Dr. Stella Emanuel, when she was an advocate of hydroxychloroquine? And they, the media, other doctors, political pundits, excoriated, and I think the WHO and the CDC, if I'm not mistaken, excoriated Dr. Stella Emanuel for saying something as terrible as hydroxychloroquine may work. How dare she say something that is so damned obvious? Well, she came back and she said, you know what I think I would like?
I demand an apology from the media. I'm talking about CNN, CNBC, and all their like New York Times, and all those people that called me crazy, from Hollywood. I mean, from people that sat around and made videos calling me crazy when I said hydroxychloroquine worked and we should not allow people to die. I'm talking about FDA, CDC, NIH. I'm talking about all of you, my colleagues, the ones that called me names, that threatened to report me to the boards and all that stuff because I said hydroxychloroquine works. Now you have all these studies that are saying it works. What about the 500,000 plus people that have died? Who is going to be responsible for them? Somebody needs to get their behind sued so bad that they will not find a way out of where they'll be locked up, because this is crazy. Even Joe Biden called me crazy. I demand an apology from every single one of you. Because when I said the truth, none of you listened. You people laughed at us, you people ridiculed us, you canceled us, and you allowed people to die. You all are so, not just, you are evil, this is wicked. And you know what? Somebody needs to be held accountable for this.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better. Because they were all wrong politically. It was all politics. They were wrong and she was correct. Then CDC Chief Dr. Rochelle Walensky waffled on reopening schools. Well, now this is from CNN, State of the Union. This is Jake Tapper talking to CDC Chief Dr. Rochelle Walensky and talking about schools.
You have said, quote, schools should be the last thing to close and the first thing to open, unquote. Should all students be back in classrooms before the end of this school year?
Well,
good morning, Jake. Thanks for having me again. Really, what we have said in our guidance is that the amount of classroom activity really depends on the amount of spread in the community. We know that the amount of disease in the community is completely reflected as to what's happening in school. If there's more disease in the community, there will be more in school, and that most disease in school does not come from in-school transmission, but comes from outside into the community. So what we would advocate for is to have more kids in school as our community spread comes down.
So the CDC guidelines suggest schools could opt not to reopen in-person classes if they're in a red zone with the high community spread that you just referred to. According to our analysis of federal data...
That's also what she said, too. Remember...
that includes 99% of American children. But you have said, quote, there's very little transmission happening in the schools. CDC researchers just wrote in JAMA that, quote, there's been little evidence that schools have contributed meaningfully to increased community transmission. So why give schools that opt not to open up?
It's a really great question. In that red zone that you're referring to, and in fact, yes, many of our current counties are in that red zone, although our numbers continue to decline. But in that red zone, we advocate for hybrid elementary school because we believe those K-5 kids are A, transmitting less, and B, really essential to have back in the classroom. And if you're in middle school or high school, we would advocate for virtual learning for that group. Or if you're able to do strict 6 feet of distancing in...
Okay, stop. I'm done with that. Strict 6 feet. Okay. Well, remember that too. Let's go back to the vaccines. I think I have enough time to cover this very quickly before the bottom of the hour break. As the year advanced, though, and we'll come back to the distance, more focus was placed on the various vaccines. The Pentagon became concerned. 1/3 of troops are turning down the CCP virus vaccine. The Pentagon announced that. About 1/3 of U.S. military troops have turned down the vaccine for the CCP virus or the novel coronavirus, said the Pentagon. Major General Jeff Taliaferro, a top official in the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said the military had a 2/3 acceptance rate for the virus vaccine. And again, this is not long ago, February 17th. In this story, though, no reason is given for that, according to the Pentagon. The spokesman said, well, we're not hiding anything. Nobody's hiding any data, he said. We don't even have a system in place across the services to specifically track data with respect to those individuals who, for whatever reason, are declining. Anybody besides me ask the basic fundamental question, well, then how do you know that only 1/3 turned that down if you don't track it? Smell test. Anybody?
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Southern Sense is conservative talk with Annie, the radio chick you bellows as host, and C.S. Bennett co-host. Informative, fun, irreverent, and politically incorrect. You never know where they'll go, but you'll love the journey. Annie is a top conservative host on Top Talk Radio and features some of the finest guests packed with important politicians and newsmakers. Listen every Friday, 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern, noon to 3 Pacific, on the SHR Media Network. Remember, Southern Sense is common sense.
Hey, are you guys listening? This is Shannon from Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM on SHR Media. I know you've been wondering where we are and what's been going on. Well, folks, that's right, we're back. So please, join us 7 to 9 a.m. Monday through Thursday on SHR Media, on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and Spotify, and Facebook Live at 11 a.m. on Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM at Facebook. You don't want to miss a minute. We've got lots of guests, lots of segments, and lots of interesting things. And let's face it, there's nowhere for you to go, so you might as well tune in. Again, Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM. We're back live on the air on SHR Media, 7 to 9 a.m. Monday through Thursday, audio and Facebook Live, audio and video. Yes, we are going to do video. Facebook Live, Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM. Hope to see you soon.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And I'm back. This is the final 27 minutes of the show. I may or may not get into some overtime. I'm not exactly sure. I don't time these, for example. I should also remind everybody that I'm crowing these days because I've been named number 18 in the top 75 late-night talk show podcasts you must follow in 2021. I'm kind of proud of that. And I haven't spent a dime on advertising. Not one stupid red cent. I was telling you before the break that the Pentagon said, why is it, or they were asking or demanding or befuddled, why apparently a full third of their soldiers are refusing the COVID vaccine. But there's a very important and salient paragraph in that article, and that's this, because I will revisit this shortly. Both the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines for the CCP virus are under emergency use authorization by the FDA. That's called an EUA, emergency use authorization. It means the agency has not fully cleared their usage. Hold that thought. The confusion is not yet over. Now, because things change pretty much like you change underwear, third shot may be needed to combat new coronavirus variants, Bill Gates says. February 17th is when this came out. A third dose of coronavirus vaccine may be needed to prevent serious cases of new variants of the disease, Bill Gates said. The billionaire philanthropist's comments come amidst the growing concern that current vaccines are less effective against the South African and Brazilian variants. Oh, you'll be in a mask for... How does 2030 sound to you so far? The discussion now is, do we just need to get a super high coverage of the current vaccine, or do we need a third dose that's just the same? Or do we need a modified vaccine? Bill Gates told CBS Evening News. So, doesn't that make you wonder? It makes me wonder, how complicated is this crap going to get? The corollary question is, how tolerant is the American public going to be? Especially when the truth is out there and I'm attempting to provide it to you, utilizing science people don't want you to know about because it falls into certain political theories and teachers' unions. Because if you're wondering, gee, why are all the teachers' unions against getting kids back in school. Well, they're linked up with their Democrat lovely people in D.C., and you always take advantage of a crisis because this is a perfect crisis for money and to get all your little leftist shindigs taken care of in schools. Well, why? It's all because of this. It's money, power, control. Ask yourself this question because you all should be looking at your child right now and saying, you know what? My child doesn't vote, but the teachers do. So now you know why the teachers are a priority and not your kids. Your kids don't vote. So as far as the Democrats are concerned, fuck them. Then more vaccine stories began trickling in. This was February 18th this year. Bet you didn't hear about this one either. Spain, second Pfizer shots halted after 46 nursing home residents die after the first shot. This was in Los Barrios, Spain. The Nuestra Senora del Rosario, Our Lady of the Rosary nursing home, is reeling due to mass deaths after mRNA inoculations. All residents and workers at the facility received the first dose of Pfizer mRNA in early January, according to Spain mainstream media outlet ABC de Sevilla. The Andalusian Health Service reported that at least 46 residents have died since January. For perspective, Our Lady has a maximum capacity of 145 residents. The Ministry of Spain said in a statement, in view of the imminent risk to public health, and in particular for the residents and workers of the center, as the current protocol for disinfection and isolation of positive cases cannot be guaranteed, they're stopping. The situation remains dire, as at least 28 residents and 12 staff members were COVID positive. So, health officials halted further mRNA shots as a result. And ever the eternal pessimist, Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci has to weigh in right about now, right? Dr. Fauci says Americans may be wearing masks until 2022. So I guess I wasn't kidding about 2030. The nation's leading infectious disease expert said Sunday, it's possible Americans are going to continue wearing masks into 2022 to protect against COVID-19. Why are you going to be wearing masks? Because he says so. Asked by CNN's Dana Bash whether Americans will need to continue masking into next year, Fauci responded, I think it's possible that that's the case. Fauci went on to predict when the U.S. will see a degree of normality. Well, I think we'll have a significant degree of normality as we get into the fall and winter by the end of the year. So what are we getting? We're getting mixed messages every month, every week. But here's something that isn't mixed, and it's highly important. And this is what I want you to remember, if nothing else, from this show. If you're pro-vaccine, yay, you. Good for you. You want the vaccine, you go get the vaccine. I'm all for that. But don't make it mandatory. And, oh, by the way, as of this broadcast, unless things change, be aware, you can't be forced to take the vaccine. Again, I say this is what you need to take away from the show tonight, and or bring people to the show so that they can hear this. We're still getting mixed messages. This makes the difference, in my opinion, between a fear porn subject and an informed individual. Did you know federal law prohibits employers and others from requiring vaccination with a COVID-19 vaccine distributed under an EUA? You are not being told that. Ever since the Food and Drug Administration granted emergency use authorization, EUA, emergency use authorization, for 2 new vaccines, employers, schools, and other organizations are grappling with whether to require COVID-19 vaccination. While organizations are certainly free to encourage their employees, students, and other members to be vaccinated, federal law provides that, at least until the vaccine is licensed, officially licensed, individuals must have the option to accept or decline to be vaccinated. Knowing what an organization can or cannot do with respect to COVID-19 vaccines can help them keep their employees, students, and members safe, and also save them from costly and time-consuming litigation. Remember this. I suggest you mark it down. Even though the FDA granted emergency use authorizations, EUAs, for the Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna vaccines in December 2020, the clinical trials the FDA will rely upon to ultimately decide whether or not to license these vaccines are still underway, and they are designed to last for approximately 2 years to collect adequate data to establish if these vaccines are safe and effective enough for the FDA to license. They are not yet licensed. They are under an EUA. Know the difference. The abbreviated timelines for the emergency use applications and the authorization, the EUA, means that there is much the FDA doesn't know about these products, even as it authorizes them for emergency use, including their effectiveness against asymptomatic infection, death, and transmission of SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes the disease. Stop. Have you heard that if something bad happens to you from taking these vaccines, the drug companies cannot be sued by you or your survivors because they're operating under an EUA. It's not a licensed vaccine. Therefore, they don't have to take the liability. Given the uncertainty about the two vaccines, their EUAs are explicit that each is an investigational vaccine not licensed for any indication, and require that all promotional material relating to the COVID-19 vaccine clearly and conspicuously state this product has not been approved or licensed by the FDA, but has been authorized for emergency use by the FDA. So if the vaccine you're about to get is operating under an EUA, find out before you take it. Getting these vaccines is voluntary under an EUA. You cannot legally be compelled by your employer or anybody else to take the vaccine. Know the difference between the two. The same section of the FDA, the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act that authorizes the FDA to grant emergency use authorization, EUAs, also requires the Secretary of Health and Human Services to ensure that individuals to whom the product is administered are informed of the option to accept or refuse administration of the product. Likewise, the FDA's guidance on emergency use authorization of medical product requires the FDA to ensure that recipients are informed to the extent practicable, given the applicable circumstances, that they have the option to accept or refuse the EUA product. It's an EUA, emergency use authorization. Find out. When the FDA grants emergency use authorizations for a vaccine, that means many questions about the product cannot be answered. Given the open questions when Congress granted the authority to issue EUAs, it chose to require that every individual should be allowed to decide for himself or herself whether or not to receive an EUA product. The FDA and the CDC apparently consider this fundamental requirement of choice important enough that even during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, they reinforced that policy decisions when issuing their guidance related to the COVID-19 vaccines. That means know the law and know your rights. It means that an organization will likely be at odds with federal law if it requires its employees, students, or other members to get a COVID-19 vaccine that is being distributed under an EUA, an emergency use authorization. I repeat, know the difference. Find out. The American media maggots are not going, they'll never admit this. But Florida Governor, by the way, Ron DeSantis, had the right idea all along. Protect the elderly, quarantine people with the greatest potential for exposure, comorbidities, and let everybody else be adults. Imagine that. And his infection rates in the state of Florida, with one of the highest percentiles of elderly in the nation, are less than that of New York and many other leftist states. And so the nutcases came out as well. A board member of a San Diego public school district claimed that reopening schools for in-person instruction was white supremacist ideology and told fellow board members to check their privilege when they discussed potential reopening dates. According to Radio 600 KOGO News, Sharda Bell Fontenot, the vice president of the La Mesa Spring Valley Schools, told board members that forcing teachers to return to classrooms when they don't want to was slavery, after another board member said that the district's plans shouldn't solely revolve around vaccination. What is it about teachers and Wuhan 19 that brings out the racists? Then we have a guy named Dr. Michael Yaden. He's the former CSO, Chief Science Officer, at Pfizer. He has a message for us that I think we should hear, if I can get him to speak.
I think to have a vaccine to use for very vulnerable people. But, this is a really important but, nobody else needs this thing. Your body and my body, I'm not vulnerable. I'm not going to be made seriously ill and die. It would be an astonishing thing, 1 in a million. You don't vaccinate the population because 1 in a million people might have a bad outcome. What you do is you look at the people who are vulnerable and you offer them the vaccine with the word offer. Informed consent is important. So it's not necessary, and it's an appalling misuse of a public platform for people to suggest that the only way we'll get our lives back is if we mass vaccinate the population. Something very smelly is going on. But the main problem I have with it, as you mentioned, is this notion of being mandated or even coerced. So you don't have to, but you can't travel if you don't. That's the sort of thing. I want your viewers to know that that's illegal under international law. That after the Second World War, atrocities of Dr. Mengele and other doctors in Japan, where they performed experiments on humans that led to their deaths, we and others in the post-war consensus led to an international law that says that no medical procedure may be performed on a human being without their informed consent, and they must benefit from it, and about 10 other things, but that's basically at the heart of it. Your government doesn't have the right to override that law. So if people are saying you've got to, otherwise you can't go shopping, you can't go to work or travel, take them to court. Absolutely illegal, and no one should stand for it. But to say again, I'm pro well-characterized vaccines. If you're elderly, frightened, and vulnerable, and it's available, I would say work with your doctor, consider it. Maybe you should. But everybody else, you don't need it, and something very odd is going on.
And he said something very odd is going on. Imagine that. I go back to politics. Politics. So meanwhile, as teachers scream about not having safety in schools, and they do dance videos, and they refuse to return to the classroom, we have this leftist scrote who was caught. Berkeley Teachers Union president caught dropping off a kid at an in-person private school despite fighting against reopening public schools. Matt Meyer is the president of the Berkeley Federation of Teachers, the union that represents public educators in the notorious liberal city, and has staunchly fought against reopening schools until all teachers have received the coronavirus vaccine. But wait, I bet he's insisting on more. It's just not written here. But that hasn't stopped Meyer from taking his own daughter to a private school opening in person. So what this means is literally this. Do what I say. I'm better than you are. I'm smarter than you are. I'm in charge. I have power, the power to tell you what to do, only my words never apply to myself. So while you're locked up, your friends are locked up, your kids are locked up, leftists and illegals are free to do whatever the hell they want. Then there's this little ditty. 108 illegal immigrants in Texas who tested positive for COVID are released. This is March 3rd, not long ago. More than 100 illegal immigrants who tested positive for the coronavirus after their arrival in Texas since late January have been released by the Border Patrol into the Lone Star State and are free to travel to other parts of the U.S. Oh, the places we'll see. And the places we'll go. And I bet that is way, 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 way low a number. Felipe Romero, a spokesman for the border city of Brownsville, Texas, told Fox News that they're telling the migrants who tested positive to follow CDC control guidelines to quarantine and maintain social distance, but that Brownsville doesn't have the authority to stop them from traveling to the rest of the country. I'm sure that's true. He said the 108 people tested positive. They account for 6.3% of the total migrants who received rapid tests at the city's main bus terminal, a program that began on January 25th, but everything there is falling apart. Who's the greatest danger to the United States right now? And that's right, it's the Biden regime, and I'm not sure he's aware that he's that danger. This is the part, okay, this is the part where I say, oh, but wait, there's more. Thousands more. Perhaps tens of thousands more. What about tuberculosis? What about measles? What about chickenpox? What about hepatitis? Hey, who needs enemies when you got Joe Biden sitting in the White House? Then there's a little bit more on Governor Cuomo. Top Cuomo aides said to have altered a report on nursing home death totals. This was, let's see, when did this come out? Oh, not long ago either. March 5th. Top aides to Governor Andrew Cuomo altered an official state health department report to obscure the true number of people killed by COVID-19 in the state's nursing homes, the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times reported. The aides, including the secretary to the governor, Melissa DeRosa, who I mentioned before, pushed state health officials to edit the July report, so only residents who died inside long-term care facilities and not those who became ill there and later died at a hospital were counted, the newspapers reported. And Cuomo still insists he did nothing. Okay, remember that WHO report that I referred to earlier? Did it pass your smell test? Because it didn't pass mine. So now, as of March 4th, WHO halts interim report on coronavirus origins amidst growing pushback. The WHO investigation was first questioned over a finding that escape by the virus from a lab was extremely unlikely. So an interim report by the WHO summarizing the investigation into the origin of the coronavirus outbreak in China has been dropped. The Wall Street Journal reported they dropped it. Other agencies tried to reach the WHO, but top scientists, top men on the investigative team said the public's demand for answers was too great to be supported in an interim report. By definition, a summary report does not have all the details, Peter Ben Embarek told the New York-based publication. So, since there is so much interest in this report, a summary only would not satisfy the curiosity of the members. Okay, as I've said before, and it's true, I speak leftist, so I'll translate for you. We got caught filleting China. People actually saw that's what we did there. So maybe it's time to rethink that conclusion. Here is a school superintendent in Alexandria, Virginia, City Public Schools. Superintendent Dr. Gregory Hutchins. He's telling you the CDC says Now, what do we know about the CDC saying? They said kids can go back to school. But he says, the CDC says, he can't put children back in classrooms. So I think the one thing you have to ask is,
in regards to the
do you believe him?
The Virginia Department of Education. I mean, I really can't tell you what I think right now, but what I personally think. But I'll tell you this: what's preventing us from being able to have 5 days a week and have everybody back into our schools are the CDC guidelines that we have to follow.
Right.
It has nothing to do with we don't want kids back in our buildings. And I think that people need to stop forgetting that we're in a pandemic and that we have CDC guidelines that everybody's telling us to follow, that we get all these emails about. But don't follow it if it deals with the kids. Just send everybody back and go back into the school. So Governor Northam, I hope that you are listening, because if we have CDC guidelines, I don't know how that is actually going to come to fruition.
Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you that Virginia Governor Northam wants schools to be opened and wants kids back in school. Well, this guy just told you. Don't you understand? He's smarter than you are. He knows better how to interpret the CDC guidelines than even the CDC director herself. So I repeat, for those of you just tuned in, it's okay for truckers, firefighters, clerks, Uber drivers, grocers, law enforcement, fast food employees, janitorial staff, servers, cooks, mechanics, delivery drivers, electricians, plumbers, contractors, barbers, utility workers. You assholes get to work, just not teachers. And if you happen to still have confidence in government, here's a story you'll love. Thousands at Oakland Coliseum receive wrong vaccine dosage, medical staff say. Thousands of people who visited the mass vaccination site at the Oakland Coliseum received the wrong vaccine dosages this week, raising questions about the effectiveness of the medication. According to two medical workers, people who received too little of the Pfizer doses received their vaccines on Monday before 2 p.m., but at that point the issue was identified and was stopped by that evening, according to the EMTs, who asked to remain anonymous in order to keep their jobs, which was confirmed by state officials. I trust government. Don't you? I'm sure you do. Hey, let me see if I can get this video to play through Facebook, because I haven't had a whole lot of... Oh, wait, here we go. Maybe I can get this. It's about a 2-minute video. Well, let's see. This is Dr. Carrie Madej. Let me see if I can get her to play.
Let's say you don't want to believe anything that I just said about the technology. That's fine. But I do think they should listen to this part. This kind of vaccine, this modified messenger RNA, modified DNA vaccine, they have tried them in the past 20 years on animal studies. And they've been terrible results, because in these studies, when the animals got the vaccine, at first they had robust immune systems, great antibodies, T-cell response, great, good, looking good. Then they challenged them with that virus or that bacteria, and every time the animals got sicker or died than much more than the placebo group, because the body had something called a cytokine storm. It actually saw this as and had a more aggressive reaction, and it attacked its own lungs, attacked its own liver, had almost like a sepsis response in the body. So we can expect that, and I think that's why they skipped the animal trials with this vaccine. They don't want anyone to know that. So in a human, you're not supposed to challenge them with the virus. That's unethical. You can only do that with an animal. So guess when? All these people who get the vaccine, when will they be challenged? The next flu season, maybe the next cold they get. And then they'll blame it on the COVID-20.
We'll have to prepare for the next one. That
Bill Gates,
I'd say is will get attention this time.
And then they'll blame it on the COVID-20 killing them when it wasn't the COVID. It was the vaccine that they intentionally gave them, knowing the results, knowing how many people they would hurt and kill, how many children they would hurt and kill. This is intentional, and people need to wake up to this, because that's pure science right there. And you can ignore all the other the technologies I said, but that is something you cannot refute.
You've just absolutely nailed it, bullseye, because the vaccine industry is the only industry in the world that creates demand by creating the very problem it claims to solve. So the vaccines cause the wave of deaths from subsequent infections. Flu shots cause more people to be infected with the flu in subsequent seasons because it weakens the normal immune response, and sometimes it overexcites the hyperinflammatory immune response, like you just mentioned, resulting in flu deaths.
That's the nature of vaccines, though, if you weren't cognizant of that fact. By the way, look up, someday when you're bored, look up the definition of vaccine. This is a little test for you. Look up the definition of vaccine, and you tell me if what you're hearing about the current number of vaccines fits the actual definition of vaccines. By the way, just a reminder of where you are right now, because I will be going into some official overtime. Hello? Hello, hello. There we go.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
If only I had a producer. This is the science. First, children are not at significant risk of poor outcomes from COVID-19. 288 children have died from the disease in the United States, compared with over 500,000 adults. The death of any child is devastating. It's terrible. But it's similar to the number who dies from influenza every year. This is the science. But you also have to ask yourself, because you're a logical, thinking, rational adult human being, where are we going to be? How can we predict where we're going to be, next month? There's an Arizona hospital worker who says nearly all of the new COVID cases are illegal aliens. We don't know where that's going to take us. Imagine that. Now, here is a microbiologist. I think this was January 26th. Professor Dolores Cahill presents information. She's a molecular biologist and immunologist. She's from Ireland. And again, you're an adult. There are things you are proscribed from hearing. I am here to ensure, to the best of my possibility, to my ability, that you hear as much as possible so that you can make completely informed choices with regard to all of these issues. But she says people may start dying a few months after vaccinations.
This is a paper from, I think, 2012 in PLOS ONE, and it's immunization with SARS coronavirus vaccine leads to pulmonary immunopathology unchallenging with the SARS virus. So the issue when you inject messenger RNA, we'll say if it had a protein from the virus like the spike protein, this plus positive RNA can go into our cells. The spike protein from the virus is expressed in our cells and may be exposed to the immune system when those cells die, and the body starts mounting an immune response, including an antibody response. But then, so say if that happens in December, and people would start doing that straight away, so within 2 or 3 weeks, that process would start. But if in February, March, April, another coronavirus is circulating naturally in 2021, that would be like a challenge with the natural, the SARS is one of the natural coronaviruses, or it could even be the common cold. That what happened in this study is that the animal models, after being challenged, got very sick, and that some of them died. So that it says, the last line of the abstract said, caution in proceeding to the application of a SARS-CoV vaccine in humans is indicated. And so the name for this thing is antibody dependent response, or cytokine storm, or immunopriming, or immune superpriming. So this is why there has been no vaccine for decades licensed for coronavirus, is because you get this issue that the messenger RNA starts expressing the virus, and then when it comes across the natural circulating coronavirus could be a month or a year or 2 years down the road, that then the people get very, very ill very quickly with this cytokine storm. And they also saw this in a respiratory vaccine, RSV. If you see it in the middle of the screen here, sorry, that's given to children, where if you look at halfway down the paragraph, most of the children who were giving this RSV vaccine, which had the same issue, most of the children experienced severe disease with infection that led to a high frequency of hospitalizations, and 2 children out of 35 died.
This is information that you need to have in order to make an informed decision. People are telling us these days mRNA vaccines are perfectly safe. But the corollary is they're operating under EUA's emergency use authorizations. So before you take the needle, find out about that specific vaccine that you may consider taking, and has it been officially licensed? Or is it operating under an EUA? That's the biggest difference in the world. So this bombshell dropped also. This is from the Epoch Times. The biggest COVID-19 vaccine skeptics. Okay, I told you about some emergency responders, some deputies and whatnot, and some people in the military. Approximately a third of the people in the military are saying, vaccine, pass. Who do you think is the biggest conglomeration of vaccine skeptics? As of March 11th, the biggest COVID-19 vaccine skeptics are frontline healthcare workers. So what do you do? What do frontline healthcare workers and first responders, what do they know about COVID vaccines that politicians and their public health advisors don't? In a January analysis by Gallup, 51% of healthcare workers and first responders polled in December 2020 were unconvinced of the merits of getting vaccinated, even if the vaccine was free, available, FDA approved, and 90% effective. Let that sink in. And then this from California, because government works so well, especially in California, always spelled it with a K. This was as of March 14th. California, always spelled it with a K. California schools use COVID relief payments for teachers' bonuses. California, always spelled it with a K, schools are using COVID relief payments for teacher bonuses, and a union has jokingly requested a trip to Hawaii using the money, even as classrooms are still closed, internal memos have revealed. Hey, that's funny. That's some funny stuff right there. That's why so many people are saying, you know what, have we been lied to all along? Remember I mentioned earlier in the show, 6 feet, 3 feet, 6 feet, 3 feet. What's the difference between the two?
CDC guidance. As you know, the guidance for social distancing, for how far people should be, there's a discrepancy. Some places, some health organizations say 3 feet or a meter is enough. But here in the United States, we say 6 feet. There's this new study from researchers in Massachusetts, just out this week. It found no significant difference in coronavirus spreading in schools where there was 6 feet of distancing versus 3 feet of distancing. But that 6 foot requirement, that's one of the main hurdles to reopening schools.
Sure. Right.
Does this study suggest to you that 3 feet is good enough?
It does indeed, and that's exactly the point I'm making, Chuck. What the CDC wants to do is they want to accumulate data, and when the data shows that there is
Wait, did I just hear Dr. Fauci say, now he told Rand Paul's full of crap if you have to wear a mask after being vaccinated. My corollary parenthesis is, well, why did you get a vaccine in the first place, topped with Did you ever look to see what the definition of a vaccine was? I suggest you do that, folks. Now Fauci said, yeah, you gotta have masks. But 3 feet? 6 feet? Sounds like he's saying 3 feet isn't that bad.
An ability to be 3 feet, they will act accordingly. They have clearly noted those data. They are, in fact, doing studies themselves. And when the data are just analyzed, and it's going to be soon. I mean, Jake, you're asking the right questions. And the CDC is very well aware.
Well, Jake's on CNN. That's why he's asking the right questions. If it was somebody from Fox, you'd be asking the wrong questions of Dr. Fauci.
That data are accumulating, making it look more like 3 feet are okay under certain circumstances. They're analyzing that, and I can assure you within a reasonable period of time, quite reasonable, they will be giving guidelines according to the data that they have.
So any mayors
won't be very long, I promise you.
Any mayors or governors or school district heads listening right now, if they hear you right now and they say, well, it sounds like Dr. Fauci thinks 3 feet is good enough, that will enable us to open our school. That's right?
Well, Jake, I don't want to get ahead of official guidelines. I can tell you and promise you, I talk to the CDC, to Dr. Walensky every single day. She is acutely aware of the accumulation of data and the fact that her team will be...
I just told you that CNN and that Jen Psaki didn't believe the CDC. They didn't believe that Dr. Walensky, who's the director of the CDC, was official enough for them. But Dr. Fauci defers to the CDC. But do you want to know what kids really want? They want to go back to school. Listen. This is a mother talking to her daughter.
358 days.
She's showing her pieces of paper, and the daughter's reading them.
Long time, right? A lot has happened since March 2020. School got canceled on the 3rd of the 13th of 2020. But we have some news. Guess what? What? Guess what? We're getting a dog? 3/3/2021.
What is 3/3/2021?
This year, on the 3rd of March.
Guess what?
What?
She gets to go back to school, and she can't wait. So you know what adults need? Which is why I was here tonight. You need to know the difference between an emergency use authorization, an EUA, and a fully licensed vaccine. So I say to you, be knowledgeable, know the law, know the difference between the two, be smart.
Download the ABC.
Wait a minute. Somebody's talking to me. And I don't want them talking to me. Not yet. So, I just messed up a wonderful wrap-up to the show. Still.
Monsieur has unlocked!
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, thanks for listening to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, live and direct right here on the SHR Media Network. If you want to contact me, you can find me on Twitter. I'm really active on Twitter at BZEP, at BZEP. And also on my blog at bloviatingzeppelin.net. Promotional consideration is by the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works. I'm going to have to look for another sponsor. That's pretty clear. Tiaras are by My Little Pony.
So will you please?
Thanks to my personal KC-135 Kettle One refueling team, with whom I will be consorting in less than an hour. I want to thank everybody for listening to me right now, listening to me live, listening to me later in podcast. Thanks to the American Trucker. You keep America moving now more than ever. Thanks for listening in podcast and also listening live in the cabs of your trucks all over American highways. Thanks to everybody in chat, all chats, YouTube, Facebook, SHR Media. You guys have a great weekend. God bless. Be safe. I'll be here Tuesday.
Everybody quiet down now and get some sleep.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Ben.
Good night, everyone. Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Good night, children.
Good night, Daddy. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.
What's going on? I was asleep. What's everybody doing?
Good night,
Good night, Jim Bob. Go to sleep.
Good night, and good luck.